right, I want to welcome everybody to My Horse University's lunchtime chat. Today we have a special guest, my colleague and good friend, Paula Hitzler, who is the manager of our Michigan State University Horse Teaching and Research Farm. And as the manager, she and her work crew are manning the fort while all the other faculty have basically been banned from campus and are working from home. So Paula is going to talk to you about how she has planned for our farm's continued care of our horses if something should happen with her. So if there's always the potential that both herself and her workforce could be put under quarantine. And I actually heard about this happening at another farm on the East Coast. So Paula has put together a really good plan for if the same thing should happen to her workforce. And I asked her to come into her plan with us. So Paula, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, and when you'll be flipping the slides?
Yes, just tell me next slide when you're ready for the next one.
Slide. Okay, very good. So welcome everybody. This is my first, my second Zoom time on Zoom, my first time ever doing this. So hopefully this will be interesting to you all. But when we started having this COVID virus issue, we needed to make sure that there was a plan in place in case myself or any one of my student employees came up with this virus, and then we had to quarantine everybody that worked here. So we put together a plan, a scenario for everything that we want to do. So we're just going to go over some of these things. If possible, if you've got neighbors or friends that you can relocate your horses to, that might be a good option for a small farm. That does not work particularly well here because we have 80 horses on the farm. So we had to think of something else. Finding some substitute workers will be really important, since you really do want to quarantine everybody else that you're working with. And I'm hoping that all of you have already closed your farms to visitors. So if you're giving lessons or you're boarding horses, I really hope that you explain to those folks that you are closed. And we closed our farm right away, so we are closed to any visitors. Anybody that you want to have work, you want to make sure you have them sign a release of liability. So let's say you have made arrangements with your neighbors or your boarders or family friends, or if you had children that are older that live outside the home, and you have them come and do your farm work, you really probably should have them sign a release of liability. You surely would hate to have them get hurt while working and then decide to sue later. So you definitely want to do that. From a healthcare perspective for your horses, you may want to talk to your veterinarian, or if you do your own vaccines, do those a little bit early. We typically don't do ours until the end of April, but you may want to do them a little bit early so those horses are covered and you do not have to worry about that, or your care providers don't have to worry about that. What we had to do is we have 9 mares foaling in the next 5 weeks. So I wanted to make sure I gave them all their pre-foaling boosters before something happens to us, so our caretakers that are coming in do not have to worry about vaccinations. And we did this for our farrier work too. So all the horses are in really good shape health-wise for the next month or 2 potentially. Our caretakers we've identified as a couple faculty members that will be coming to the farm. So how I prepared one of the faculty members, she is the lead person that will be taking on this team, is I took her around the farm and showed her all the intricacies of the farm And so you're definitely going to want to make that plan. And I believe in the PowerPoint later on, we will go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. In planning for this potential quarantine for my staff, I made sure I ordered extra feed, extra bedding. I wanted to make sure I had a nice supply to get us through a couple months, not just to ease the discomfort of our other team coming in and having to figure out how to order that, but I was worried about the supply chain, that if they were going to have problems, I wanted to make sure I was well taken care of. That same type of planning ahead would be important for things like medical supplies. I wanted to make sure that I had all my folding supplies. In fact, earlier today, I ordered some milk replacer just in case if we were gone, we had a problem with a mare, you know, maybe she foaled and not producing milk, or maybe this now is an orphan foal, that I didn't have to have the team that's coming in to replace us worry about how do I find milk replacers. So I'm having all that stuff ready to go and being well prepared in the event that we can no longer come to work. Basic repairs, if you know you've got some things that are sitting out there that, gosh, I'll get to that one day and fix it, you may want to think about doing that now. Anything that horses could get injured on, you may want to just tidy that up. And it's hard to think of those things, but we need to think of those things because it's really important, and we probably should have had a plan all along. I know at Michigan State we're required to have an emergency plan, but you know, it's always one of those things you kind of have and you'll never use, but having that in the past has been kind of helpful to planning for this now. Having things like, if you can find them, I hope you can, disinfectant for your hands and gloves, those type of things might be nice to have to supply to your workers. Okay, next slide, please. For your substitute, your substitutes are our, we call it our second team, or team B, I guess you could say. You can have other professionals. So I have two faculty members and a lab technician. They can be past employees. I do have a former student that is on temporary on-call status for the farm here that I can call her in as well. And that person's really nice to have because she has worked here. So that is really helpful. But, you know, if you have a boarder that is willing to take this emergency situation on, family members or friends, would be really nice. Make sure that your substitute crew knows how to reach the farrier, how to reach the veterinarian. And in our case, I wanted to make sure that our new crew would know, what do we take to the Michigan State University Veterinary Medical Center, their contact numbers, who is our day-to-day routine veterinarian for day-to-day cases. So let's say we have something that needs to be sutured up, or we have a lameness that we can't handle on the farm. Who is our farrier in case, you know, a shoe gets sprung, needs somebody out. So we wanted those basic numbers. Other numbers that might be helpful is if you've got a plumber or an electrician that you use, or a farm maintenance person that you use, it would be a good idea to think about those phone numbers as well. I supplied our group with what we call infrastructure management, those contact numbers. So in the event that we have an outside drinker, all of a sudden a pipe bursts and I've got water everywhere and horses don't have access to water because it's leaking everywhere, they have the phone number to call and that person can come in and help them repair that. I know right now getting a veterinarian out might be a little challenging. I know in Michigan, we just were told only emergency type of work. So if you haven't gotten to that point in your state, it might be a good idea to get those routine vaccinations done. If you have the vet do that, just in case your state now says your veterinarians can't come up for routine things, only emergency type of situations. And again, we kind of mentioned having your supplies, having extra supplies, having them where they're easy to get to for this team that's coming in to replace you. The same thing with your bedding. Make sure you're writing things down as what are you doing with manure? How do you clean these stalls? Where do you put the manure? Do you compost at someplace? Making sure you let those people know. In our case, I want to make sure Our crew knows that we use the tractor and the manure spreader and how to hook up the PTO of the manure spreader and where do we drive that manure to deposit that. So all those little things are super important. And then trying to make things easier for them. We drop down hay and put them in our grooming stalls, so our replacement team doesn't have to climb up in the mow to drop hay. So we try to have hay right there for them. The barn maybe doesn't look as neat, but we are prepared and we're trying to make it easier for the next team to come in if we have to be quarantined. So next slide. So right now we are in a, not quite an essential employees only. We're at the what they call necessary employees. So I am right now still able to have a few students come to the farm and help us out, and they're called necessary students. At some point we may be only going to essential employees. And I know that's to reduce any kind of health risk to other employees, but right now we're still just in the necessary category. So you want to make sure you're not having large groups, obviously, and following all the CDC recommendations as far as distancing and that sort of thing. So only have what you really need to get through the feeding and the chores of your horses. What we've done too to help out is I've made a couple different plans. I have a plan now because we're a little short-handed because many of my students went home, is that we turned out quite a few horses. So horses that we were starting a lot of 3-year-olds under saddle. So since I don't have those students that can work those horses, we've turned those out. That also helps with our number of stalls that we clean. Now, if we get to essential where there's just 3 of us that are working, there's a few more horses that will be going out. And if we get to team B coming in because we're all home, then I freed up some lots today so I could turn out everybody but pregnant mares that are getting ready to foal or stallions. So Chris Skelly, who is on that team, will be happy. It'll be about 7 less stalls than we have now. So we are trying to make it where it is super simple. So if you are thinking about making a plan, you might have to switch some of your turnout situations around so you can put horses out 24/7 and give them some hay, and maybe they have a bunk feeder or someplace to feed those horses where they don't have to do stalls. I know that's not possible for everybody, but what we want to do is try to reduce how much work your replacements are going to have to do. When you're feeding, remember a forage-based diet. Try to limit or eliminate totally all the extra things that you can eliminate. So if feeding a supplement really isn't necessary, and for most horses, they'll be fine for a couple weeks without it, it may be something to, if you can't come to your place, you can't come to the barn and you have replacements, that you can eliminate maybe feeding supplements, maybe soaking hay, maybe, just kind of make that easier for those folks, because I know I'm going to really appreciate when this faculty team comes and helps. So I want to make it easy for them. So just try to pull back things that aren't an emergency to do for those horses. Making sure you're labeling everything, exactly what this animal gets to eat, making sure you're measuring things like your scoops, that if you say, oh, I feed it 1 scoop of this, that you actually provide them the scoop that you want, and that you don't have 4 different scoop sizes for them to choose from. So you really need to, I hate to say this, but dumb it down. You really need to make it super simple. You may want to consider removing shoes altogether. Horses can go a long time, and yeah, their feet might get a little bit long, but it really isn't going to hurt them if they're barefoot and they get a little bit long. Whereas you may not want that same situation with shoes, so that might be something to consider. And just try to eliminate what isn't totally essential. Just kind of pull back a little bit, just get lean and mean. And that's what we've done here, and what the plan is for if we have to get to this extra team of folks coming in. Next slide, please.
Hey, Paula,
Yeah.
before we move forward, we did have one question about can horses get COVID-19? And I put a link for everybody to follow. It's a disease fact sheet on coronavirus and horses from AAEP, which is the American Association of Equine Practitioners. And horses basically do not get COVID-19, so they can't transmit COVID-19 to people and vice versa. But horses do have their own coronavirus that is transmissible from horse to horse. So that's an excellent question and a great fact sheet to go along with it.
Oh, that is great. What I have done for our replacement team is I've made them a farm, and you may not be able to see this, a farm diagram, and this is definitely not to scale, but when we feed our outside horses, we have different lots and pastures, and they all have names. So I made this little diagram. I'll hold this up, and you may not be able to see this very good, but it's a little schematic of the farm with the pasture names and the lot names. So when this replacement team comes in, they know that the north middle pasture gets this much feed. And with that, I have created this just really simple sheet that has horse locations. So in this one right here, this is the north middle repro pipe lot. So these are all the horses that live in that lot. And you can put more descriptions if you want. So bay mare, you know, with a star strip and a snip. I just put gray Arabian, a gray gelding. But you may want to, you can put more detail on these horse locations, what horses are in those pens, and that's going to be kind of important. So let's say you're really laid up and you have your neighbor who's feeding your horses and you have quite a few horses in a pasture. You may want to have some kind of identifying mark on those horses. So if somebody gets sick, she can say, oh gosh, the bay gelding with the star and the right fore pastern is acting kind of colicky. That you may even want to put the horses' names that are living in that pen, descriptions of each of those horses that are living in that pen. So that person knows, oh, that's Johnny the horse, you know, so she can, you know, talk to the veterinarian and say, oh, Johnny's sick. And help you out that way. So I've tried to put a little bit of an identification feature about each of those horses in each of those pens. So if something were to happen, the replacement people know that, oh, that was Chanel, is the bay mare. She's acting kind of colicky. So we can keep a record of that horse while she's being treated while I'm away, and they know who that is. And they can access other information about that horse as well, such as, like, you know, is she pregnant? How old is she? When was the last time she was dewormed or vaccinated? So they can take that identifying feature about the horse and then go ahead and look on health records. So providing a map for pasture locations is really important. Where are your supplies kept? So in my sheet, it's almost like something I would leave a house sitter. Is I would say, okay, this grain is stored in this part of the barn. This alfalfa hay is stored in this part of the mow. If you need fence pliers, they're stored here. Our gas cans are full, so you may want to think about, you know, if you're using gas cans to run, we have a gator that we feed our outside horses with, you know, making sure that the gas cans are full and the gator is full of gas and the tractor is full of diesel. You may want to make sure all that always stays full and ready to go, because we just don't know what's going to happen in this crazy time. Next slide, please. So along that same lines, you know, having descriptions of your horses, the name, the age, the breed, and this is going to be really important for border horses that live in pastures, that you want to make sure that you have contact information on the owner of that boarded horse. Is that horse insured, and have insurance information about that horse, and have that all accessible to the person who is replacing you. That if you have a border horse that's out in pasture board, you know who that horse is, who have access to all that horse's information, access to that horse's health status, insurance contact and owner information. So if something happens and you have to call the veterinarian, you can contact, you know, the owner of that horse, make sure you contacted the insurance company for that horse. So you want to have, you know, a way to identify these horses and have that accessible to your replacements. Next slide, please. So what we did is I first wrote out this 3-page document, typed, single-spaced, and I still have that. And as I'm changing things around, I keep that updated. I thought, gosh, well, maybe this would be a really good idea just to take a video camera and walk around the farm and talk about all the things that people who are just visiting may not know, such as, you know, shutting the doors properly. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but if we don't latch them a certain way, that the horses could push them open, and where do we store things, and what are the lots called, and any special considerations such as stallion handling. Maybe you want to even include, let's say you've got a bunch of horses there and some boarders, and you know, horse A doesn't get along with horse B, so you sure as heck don't want to turn those out together. Or maybe, you know, one horse is a little bit more aggressive and difficult to handle, that you want to put quirky behaviors down on that sheet. So I don't think you can ever put too much information down. So this is just one of the videos that we put together. And again, this is just walking through the barn with my little, you know, my little camera. And you can do that same thing with your phone, and then just set that aside in case you need it. I uploaded these to a YouTube link so I could send those to whoever is going to replace us. So I think we're ready to play one of them, right?
Okay, so we've just come in the front of the barn, and to the right here is the chart of the horses that are in the barns, both barns, and this is just where we keep track of what's been done with them for the day. And then we'll move towards the feed room, and this dry erase board is where we keep notes, and you'll see that there are some horses that get some medications there, and then the sheet that has the instruction. Then we'll walk to the feed room. This hay is brought down from the lower barn. You could probably take it from the hay barn itself in the gator. And then we've got our feed cart here. And the feed cart has 2 components. There's the ETB, which is the red pellet, the Omega, which is the brown pellet. The ETB comes from the old barn in the bulk bin, the auger into the bin in the feed room, and then the Omega is in the bags, and you can bring that down from the old barn mow. So we bring the ETB over in this trash can when it needs to be refilled, and then here's some bags of the Omega. And then we also have over in this corner cat food, because we have 2 barn cats. So we'll walk out here and we'll open the door and show you where the stallions go. So right outside this door we have 1 stallion lot here, and then we've got another one that kind of goes right next to the hot walker. All these stallions need to have a chain over their nose when you lead them out, and then if you turn Marco out, make sure there's nobody else in the other stallion lot. And then the horses that are in the repro barn pipe lot are locked out. And then from this vantage point you can see lot 1 and 2 and 3 here, and on the other side of the outdoor arena is the hay field, and next to that is the racetrack field.
Good. So I wanted to identify the turnout lots again and the pasture names. So when our replacement group goes out to feed the outside horses, they know where they are. And we have other videos. There's another clip coming up of You know, where are the medications stored? How do you give the medications? Is there a medication checkoff sheet to make sure a horse does receive medication? So those kind of things you don't want to pull back on. You want to continue those things if horses are on, let's say, Cushing's medication or something like that. But you want to make sure that you have ample medication, it's easy to find, and then whoever replacing you is comfortable with giving those medications and can identify the horse that receives those. Okay, we can play this next clip.
So each of the horses has their own stall feeding card. So you see with this horse, he gets a half a scoop of the ETB, a quarter scoop of the omega, and it's a little different in the afternoon. And the scoops are all measured out, so you'll see black lines that are measured for half scoop, quarter scoop, three-quarter scoops, and full. So that's how we measure that. And then with these stall doors, the most important thing is that you latch the bottom of these stalls. So there's a prong and a little cutout portion of the stall. And it's critically important that you make sure that that's connected. There's that prong, there's the cutout. It has to fit in there, because if it doesn't fit in there, there's nothing else that keeps that bottom part of that door closed. And then you must also make sure you double check those latches. That's something that people who haven't worked here before often forget, and then we wonder why there's a horse loose or something's occurred. So we don't want to do that. So
you want to think about all those quirky, sorry Chris, I didn't even talk over you, those quirky things, you know, and you want to try to put those on those videos, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. This certainly isn't fancy. I can't do anything fancy technology wise. So, but I think this video will help our replacement group, as well as, you know, leaving them notes and all the horse information. I'm not sure if I'm connected anymore.
Yep, you're okay. Still there. I just put myself on,
okay.
on mute. Are you?
I'm open to questions.
Okay.
I think I covered everything. I'm certainly happy to entertain questions, or there might be things that other people can suggest that I forgot to bring up, and we can certainly discuss all of those.
Let's see, if you have questions and you want to go to the chat, you can type those right in the chat. I should have mentioned that from the get-go, but several of y'all are in there right now.
And then Gwen, this is the last slide, right?
Yeah, there's one more, but it's just the conclusion slide.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
There was a question about where the video footage was taken from, and I'm typing in right now. That's from the MSU Horse Teaching and Research Center in East Lansing. We are extremely lucky to have such a great facility to teach out of, do research out of, do extension projects out of, and we're very fortunate to have Paula in as the farm manager of that facility. Paula, how long have you been there?
I've been here 31 years. Long time.
Okay, Alan says that we add pictures to descriptions of the horses with the feed instructions.
Perfect.
That helps newer volunteers. So, so great.
That's perfect.
Great idea. Yeah. And Paula, what are you doing as far as keeping your workers safe, I guess, from each other right now?
It's harder. It's easier said than done. But prior to us coming to work in the morning, we actually have to fill out an online survey as it relates to health. So their health questions such as, have you been out of the country in the last 14 days? Have you been exposed to anybody that has been tested positive for COVID? Do you have a fever? Are you coughing? Those type of things. So we are required before we get to work to answer those survey questions. And so all of my student employees are answering those questions before they come to work. Now, you know, it can be hard to separate these students a little bit, but we are trying to make sure we're socially distancing. It's the same group of students working together every day, and I nag them about, please just go home and isolate yourself. Don't see anybody. And so we're really trying to be really aware that, you know, work and then home, and then try to really be good about staying at home and not exposing yourself, because once one person's exposed, that's going to have huge consequences for everybody else. And we really don't want to have to sit at home and have the replacement team come in.
We had a question from Ann Wood. I know you said that horses can't transmit COVID-19 to people, but can they carry the virus from one person to another? And I think probably, Ann, you're referring to maybe their coat. And everything that we're reading right now suggests that no, they don't. The coat, any very porous type surface is not a good surface for COVID-19 to stay on. So right now they're, you know, the consensus is that you can't necessarily get COVID-19 from petting your dog and petting your horse. However, that being said, there's always a caveat in everything I've read that said, you know, as we learn more of the disease, you know, things are always subject to change. So I think, Paula, at the farm, what are you doing from a standpoint of halters on horses? To me, that would be more of a point of transmission from person to person. If you're using a halter that somebody else has placed on a horse, then potentially the buckles of the halter might be a place where transmission might occur.
Yeah, I think disinfecting those things, if it's feasible, makes a lot of sense. So not particularly feasible here, but what we are doing is we have hand sanitizer at various locations of the farm. I'm encouraging them to wash their hands often. We remind them those simple things: wash your hands, don't put your hands on your face, those type of things. And from what I can tell, those are the two biggest things that you can do to keep yourself safe. Wash your hands, don't touch your face. So we're trying to instill those good hygiene behaviors with the students. I don't think we could disinfect everything on this farm. It's just not feasible. So, I mean, if you have a small enough place and you can do that, that is probably best practices. But what we're doing here is just, you know, we've got bathrooms accessible for hand washing, hand sanitizer in many different locations. We are disinfecting things like entryway doorknobs and restroom doorknobs and the sinks and the spigots and the toilets. That we're disinfecting any place where your hands would touch without gloves. And most of us are wearing gloves when we're working at the farm, but the door handles going in and out of the barn. So there's some surfaces like that we are disinfecting, but I don't know if it's feasible to be able to disinfect halters and brushes and all of those type of things. But if you have a smaller facility and you can do that, that probably would be very best practice.
Yeah, and one thing that I've I know that some workplaces are doing, they're designating equipment per person. So, you know, when we talk about biosecurity with horses, a lot of times we say designate equipment for horse. But in this scenario where we're trying to not have people-to-people transmission, maybe one person is designated one halter, one pitchfork, maybe one set of stalls, so that they're doing all the latching and unlatching. Mm-hmm. And again, that would be much easier to do at a smaller operation. But it's something that potentially you could implement at your own barn.
Yeah, and then try to get lean and mean. I mean, try to get as few people at your facility as you can. And that will eliminate the amount of exposure that you yourself or others can get. So just if you really don't need those people working at the barn to get things done, and you can really do it yourself, try to do it yourself, and then have someone that can step in the event that you become ill. But try to eliminate how many people you have working there. That's why people are recommending, don't do lessons. Don't have your clients come out. And I know there's some facilities that are continuing to do that, but that is just bringing in more exposure to you. And so try to eliminate the amount of people you're having help you do your chores. So try to make things simple for you so you don't have to have as much help even.
Okay, Paula, we've got a question in the chat. So horses being turned out with halters or without? I can see this going both ways. Easier for a stranger to catch if needed if they are haltered, but also can be more at risk to leave them turned out with a halter.
Yeah,
So,
I think that depends so much on your fencing situation, what type of halters you're using. We don't turn anybody out with halters left on, with the exception of the stallions. But I could see where it may help your neighbor, you know, if you had a halter and some duct tape on the cheek piece and it says this is Jimmy, might help them identify horses. So a lot of this is just risk reward type of situation. You know, these are extenuating circumstances, but just make sure you're using common sense, that you're not putting an overly big halter on a horse where it could get hooked up on some kind of fencing piece, or you know, implements that might be in your pasture. If you can do breakaway halters, that would be better. You know, so just kind of use a little bit of common sense when you do that. And again, it's a risk reward type of scenario.
yeah, and I think a lot of people, like if you go to the thoroughbred farms, they'll typically turn out some of their horses with leather halters, you know, versus nylon that absolutely will not break, but leather is just a bit more apt to break. Let's see, Sylvia chimed in, make sure, and she's really just iterating everything you just said, Paula, make sure it's a breakaway halter so it can be broken if it got caught. So thanks, Sylvia. Any other questions for Paula? I think that's it. Lunchtime is over. We appreciate you guys coming. We have recorded this session and it's going to be available on YouTube. So if you have anybody that says, oh darn, I missed that chat, just tell them to go to either My Horse University YouTube site, or we'll also share the link once we get it up on our Facebook page. Here Sylvia also said, I put the name of the horse and age and phone number in case it gets loose on her halter.
Excellent idea.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And they do make little halter tags as well. Information on if you have a breeding farm and you're used to using neckband IDs for horses, that might be something you might consider. And even getting the sticky pencils, I guess you call them. Paula, you know what I'm saying when we ride on livestock, cattle and stuff?
Like those grease markers.
Grease marker, thank you very much. Some people actually use that as well on the horse's hip. That'll tend to rub off after a while, but at least it gives you something early on. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Be well.
Take care.